Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. I Engineer Shad Muhammad, lecturer at Department of Civil Engineering, ComSets University, Islamabad, Sahiwal campus. Welcome you all to this another interesting lecture on soil investigations, problems and compaction. This will be our lecture number 31 of the subject Civil Engineering, Construction and Graphics. So in our previous lecture we studied regarding formwork, building formwork, and we categorized them into based on materials and based on its physical nature or system. In today's lecture, lecture number 31, we will be covering typical geotechnical section activities. What are those activities in which geotechnical engineer is involved? Geotechnical investigations, office review, what are included in office review, boring and in situ test frequency. So how frequently you should test boring and conduct boring and in situ tests and field investigations, subsurface soil investigation and surface soil investigations, above ground indicators of soil condition, soil classification system, soil groups, soil problems, and sumps and ditches for dewatering of excavation. So regarding some soil problems, that will be regarding dewatering, its suitability, use of sumps and ditches in cofferdams, and advantages of sumps and ditches and disadvantages of sump and ditches, and we will study compaction of soil. So this is a very extensive topic regarding soil investigation, but we will be just going through and recalling many of the concepts which we have studied in particularly in Geotechnical Engineering 1 and Geotechnical Engineering 2 or Foundation Engineering. So we will be just overviewing them. So typical geotechnical section activities which are conducted by geotechnical consultancies are subsurface soil investigation, laboratory testing of soil and rocks, foundation design, they conduct foundation design, and soil and rock slope engineering. So slope is a major topic or a major phenomena which is covered in by geotechnical engineers. Aggregate resource evaluation, so aggregate source database management, they have to properly manage the database of the aggregates. Water groundwater investigations, so subsurface drainage design or recommendations. So how are you going to conduct the drainage, or you are going to develop the system for drainage of the water. So retaining wall design, vibration monitoring, geosynthetic applications and project scoping, and new technology implementation, site monitoring and instrumentation, construction review and assistance, and technical certification. So these are the few of the particular activities which geotechnical section conduct in any geotechnical consultancy or any geotechnical engineer is involved. So these activities are not limited to these few mentioned activities. So they are just overview of those activities which are conducted. Geotechnical investigation. Geotechnical investigations are essential components of the successful geotechnical engineering analysis and foundation recommendation report. So for geotechnical engineering analysis, like structure analysis, for geotechnical engineering analysis and foundation design, you require geotechnical investigation. These investigations allow geotechnical engineers and geologists. So in many mega projects, geotechnical engineers and geologists work together to characterize subsurface condition and make engineering judgments. So they characterize the subsurface condition and they categorize them, and they identify at which quality of soil it is and how much its bearing capacity and shear strength and all those factors related to soil, and make engineering which are helpful in making quite accurate engineering judgments, and how the earth will behave when subjected to structure and embankments, roads associated with highway construction. So it is particularly a study that how earth will behave when it is subjected to loadings. So if that is a tall building, then you require proper extensive geotechnical investigation. If that is a major highway construction, then you require proper extensive geotechnical investigation, or some bridges. So even dams requires detailed geotechnical investigations. So subsurface investigations include methods such as foundation drilling and in situ methods. So basically two types of methods are there, that if you are drilling the foundation, or in situ test methods are involved. The subsurface soil and rocks are investigated to determine properties including soil or rock stratigraphy or classification, and how the stratas of the soil are divided, or what are their thicknesses, and what are their depths. Soil rock strength parameters, soil rock stiffness parameters, groundwater conditions. So these are the major characteristics which are investigated by geotechnical investigations. Good quality geotechnical investigations are very crucial to the success of every construction project. So they are very important regarding construction processes, and they are held in prior to conducting any construction. A proper geotechnical investigation will identify ground, underground and soil conditions, and will determine the proper geotechnical design parameters. So underground condition identification of underground condition and soil conditions are identified, and they are particularly design parameters. On the basis of these inputs, you have the output of the design of foundation. Unfortunately, many projects lack a proper geotechnical investigations. So if there is lack of awareness regarding soil behavior, or people do not care about soils a lot, and then or that is a developing country, then there are very poor geotechnical investigations. Otherwise very refined projects and complex projects, and in developed countries geotechnical investigation is particularly very important. As a result, engineers are all too often forced to use over conservative design parameters. So if you do not have geotechnical engineers do not have proper geotechnical investigation details, then they are forced to or they are pushed against over conservative design, or factor of safety is too much. So in a worst scenario, an inadequate geotechnical investigation will not properly identify soil condition, and will result in unexpected delays, failures, and added construction costs. So this is the price of injustice which you are doing with the soil, and if you are not having proper investigation, then soil can behave abnormally, and unexpected delays in your project can occur, and failure of the structures can occur, and it can add additional construction cost. So particularly in which structures geotechnical investigations are majorly conducted: bridges and retaining walls, large culverts and roadway embankments, buildings, communication and light towers, and miscellaneous structures are those structures which are not mentioned. So they are covered in geotechnical investigations. A good quality geotechnical investigation identifies soil layers and types, bedrock elevation if possible. So this is very important, that what geotechnical investigation should identify or investigate. Soil layers are how the soil layers are distributed, divided beneath the surface, and the types of soil which is deposited there, and bedrock elevation, at which depth there is bedrock, soil density and strength, as well as mechanical soil properties. So you have discussed and studied them detail in soil mechanics 1 and soil mechanics 2, and groundwater condition, what is the depth of the groundwater and how much it is in quantity, and aquifers and miscellaneous items regarding groundwater conditions. Obstructions and existing underground structures, if there are anomalies underground, then they are investigated. A soil investigation may include the following items: reconnaissance, exploration and field tests. Reconnaissance are preliminary investigations, and exploration is detailed investigation, and field tests are with the help of equipment you are going to test the soil. Reconnaissance include visual inspection on the basis of your particular five senses. You can inspect the soil, that the condition of the soil and the type of the soil, and air photography you can conduct, and geological reports and maps. With the help of geological reports and maps, you can investigate or expect the soil strata and records of the past construction, nearby construction if there is, and then you can take help from those past records. Exploration includes geophysical exploration and electrical exploration, pits, sampling and testing, and boring and sampling and testing. So geotechnical, geophysical exploration can be conducted with the help of electrical instrumentation. Investigation, geotechnical investigations can be conducted with the help of pits and borings. Those can be conducted. So field tests include penetration test, vein shear test, and water table, pore pressure test, and pumping test, and load test, and load bearing test, and compaction test. So these are the major field tests which are conducted on sites. So geotechnical investigations, the above geotechnical data are then assessed for risks posed by the site conditions. So if there are these data we attain, and then we expect that what are the risks underground, and used in designing earthworks, structure, foundation. So they are what we have to do against the risks. We have to provide some proper mitigation formula or proper mechanism against those risks. Proper geotechnical investigation will also aid in properly identifying critical points to monitor during earthwork and foundation construction. So during construction, they are also important that you have to critically monitor those areas of abnormality during your construction process. Geotechnical site investigations are almost always needed in major projects and help gain an understanding of the project area. So they are helpful that how soil strata is on which the project is going to be executed. Soil and rock samples are typically collected by drilling rigs and appropriate samplers. So with the help of drilling rigs, different types of drilling rigs and appropriate samplers, soil and rock samples are collected, and on which investigations are carried out. Soil samples are then transported to geotechnical laboratory, where a number of geotechnical tests are carried out. So these samples which are in situ, they may be disturbed or undisturbed samples. They are then transported to geotechnical laboratories, where extensively and enclosed environment specific tests are conducted. The in situ tests typically include standard penetration and cone penetration tests. So these are the major tests which are conducted on site. The standard penetration test is one of the oldest geotechnical field tests. It is the in situ dynamic penetration test designed to provide information on geotechnical engineering properties of the soil. So this is majorly used for soil exploration. It involves this is the process by which that SPT is conducted. It involves the insertion of the standard sampler within a borehole. A sampler is inserted in the borehole. Rods are hammered with a standard 140 pound weight that drops a distance of 30 inches. So there's a hammering is being conducted, and with the help of hammering, 140 pound weight is dropped at a distance of 30 inches. Number of blows required to drive the sampler through 6 inches interval is recorded, and the sum of blows over the last two 6-inch interval is referred as standard penetration number. So this is the process through which standard penetration test is conducted. For most projects, standard pre-design activities include before designing, you have got the output from the investigation, so how you are going to use them. Develop a geotechnical investigation plan. So you have to develop the geotechnical investigation plan, that where you are going to conduct which test, and how are you going to deal with that area. Perform geotechnical investigation. So on site, you have to execute that plan and perform that investigation and collect samples from site. Perform geotechnical lab analysis. So the samples which are collected with the help of geotechnical investigation, keeping view geotechnical investigation plan, then on those samples lab analysis are conducted. Lab geotechnical recommendations, then they recommend that which type of soil it is, and which type of complications it has, and which type of foundation is recommended, and what should be the, they give you the design parameters against which design engineer will design the foundation. Field investigations duration depends on weather availability, access, weather condition, availability of access, depth of investigation, and type of sampling needed. So the quality of samples needed and depth of investigation, the greater the depth, the more difficult it will be. The harsher the weather condition, then the harsher the more time consuming that will be. Availability of access, so all these are dependent on which field investigation is dependent. Lab analysis of soil samples can take time from large volume of test, or if time dependent parameters are of interest requiring longer testing times. So lab analysis can take time based on how much rush there is on the lab, and how much large volume of tests they have to conduct per day. And secondly thing is this, that maybe you are dealing with the time dependent parameters which are based on time, and after some particular like compaction test and consolidation test, so require longer testing times. Soil investigation include office review. While most may think of subsurface investigation as consisting of field work, so many of you guys will be thinking that geotechnical investigation is directly dealing in situ testing, or taking the sample from the field. There are many tasks that should be completed in the office prior to any field work being started to aid the overall investigation. So prior to conducting geotechnical investigation on site and taking sample, you have to go through different documentation which will be helpful in conducting your, or making your work, simplifying your work and aiding your work. So office tasks include researching historical data. So historical data needs to be investigated, reviewing available subsurface information. So if you do have any subsurface information regarding the specific area, then you need to consider that, and site data and planning the subsurface investigation. So site data, if that is available, and planning the surface, that will be helpful in planning the subsurface investigation. Or if you have some plans regarding the subsurface investigation of that particular area, so they are considered in the research on those activities are considered in office review. And all subsurface investigations should begin with a collection of existing data for the project. So all the existing data should be collected as possible. So that data include geological maps, aerial photographies, and Google Maps can be used, and Google Earth can be used, and well records, piezometer records, existing borings, and historical bridge plans with plotted boring, pre-designed plans, profiles and cross sections, historical geotechnical reports, preliminary bridge plan and bridge surveys, property ownership information, utility location information, contour maps, hydraulic reports. So different types of, you can see that how much you can think. The more you think, the more possibilities you get, that you can get the data of the nearby area, which will be helpful in your geotechnical investigation. So boring and in situ test frequency, how frequent and how deep boring should be, and how frequently that in situ test should be performed. Increase the number of borings in situ tests required as needed based on field observation and other design consideration. So they are not limited that you have to conduct this much based on your field observation and consideration. you can increase the number of borings and in situ tests. Locate and space borings as topography, site conditions, soil conditions, and design factors dictate. So your location of the boring and spacing of each boring should be based on, and can be based and will be based on, topography and soil area levels and site conditions, soil conditions, and design parameters which you need to explore. However, do not locate boring further than 30 feet from the proposed structure location. So this is a recommendation of one of the consultant, that experienced consultant, that your boring should not be located more than 30 feet from the proposed structure. So the table shows that minimum number of borings and minimum depth. So these are the application and minimum number of exploration points, and these are the number and the minimum depth, the depth. If that is shallow foundation, so shallow foundation, for shallow foundations, for bridge substructure, width less than or equal to 100 feet, a minimum of 1 SPT boring per substructure. So if there is a big bridge you are going to construct, and you want to investigate substructure, so if substructure of the bridge width is less than or equal to 100 feet, so minimum width is less than or equal to 100 feet, then one SPT, one boring SPT need to be conducted. And for bridge substructure width greater than 100 feet, a minimum of, this is width not depth, so width of 100 feet, a minimum of 2 SPTs. If that is the bridge substructure width is greater than 100 feet, then you have to conduct 2 SPTs per substructure. So for large culverts, 80 square feet of the opening. So on culverts are based on opening of the culvert. If that is larger than 80 square feet, a minimum of the 2 SPT boring per structure. For culverts less than or equal to, a minimum of 2 SPT boring per structure. So for those 2 SPTs per structure need to be conducted. And for culverts less than or equal to, there should be a comma here, for culverts less than or equal to 300 feet in length, and a minimum of 3 SPT boring of culverts greater than 3 feet in length. So if that is area is this much and greater, so a minimum of 2 SPT need to be conducted if your length of the culvert is equal to 300 feet, and minimum of 3 SPT, 2 SPT when your area is 80 square feet and length of the culvert is 300 feet, and 3 SPT test borings need to be conducted, and when your area is 80 square feet or more than 80 square feet, and length is greater than 300 feet in length. Alright, for buildings, a minimum of 1 SPT boring at each building corner and 1 SPT boring near the center of the building. So almost if that is square building or rectangular building or those buildings, you have to consider the shape. So you can to simplify your work, you can take a square of those that area and conduct 4 SPTs at the corners and 1 SPT at the center of the area. For vertical structures, light towers, radio towers, a minimum of 1 SPT boring per substructure. So for vertical structures, towers, radio towers, a minimum of 1 SPT per boring per substructure needs to be conducted. So this was regarding bridges and culverts and buildings and some specific structures. Number of exploration points. So minimum depth of exploration should be, depth of exploration will be greater enough to fully penetrate unsuitable foundation soils such as peat, organic soil, soft fine grained soil into competent material of suitable bearing capacity, e.g. stiff to hard cohesive soil, compact to dense granular soil or bedrock. So your depth should be great enough that you should be penetrating throughout the weak soil, and you should reach towards the soil which have greater bearing capacity, a good soil. that have stiff nature and hard cohesive soil, compact to dense granular soil, or bedrock. So this is the requirement, that simple requirement, at least, or your depth should be at least to a depth where stresses increase due to estimated footing load is less than 15% of the applied stress at the base of the footing. So this is data, you know, that load is transferred in triangular manner onto the soil. So if there is a base and there is a loading, so your depth should be exploration depth should be such that there should be means there is a triangle, and 15% of the applied stresses at the base of the footing, so they should reach at the that area, and that will be the depth of exploration. So these are the minimum depths. In terms of the width of footing, at least 2 times for axis symmetric case and 4 times for strip footing, interpolate for intermediate cases. So if your footing is having axis symmetric regarding the width, so at least 2 times deeper you should investigate, and if it is strip footing, then at least 4 times you should 4 times the depth of the width of the footing you should investigate. If bedrock is encountered before the depth required by item number 2 above is achieved, exploration depth should be greater enough to penetrate a minimum of 10 feet in bedrock, but rock exploration will be sufficient to characterize compressibility of infill material and near horizontal to horizontal discontinuities. So you can see that if bedrock is encountered, then depth of required. So if it says that according to point number 1, if bedrock is encountered, and then you should follow this provision, and if that provision is also followed, then at least 10 feet deep you should penetrate your SPT in the bedrock, but bedrock exploration alright. For deep foundation driven piles, so you know that in deep foundation you have to drive the piles, so for bridge substructure width less than or equal to 100 feet. If you have a bridge substructure and width is less than or equal to 100 feet, a minimum of 1 SPT, and for bridge structure greater than 2 SPTs as per previous one, and these are same, and for buildings a minimum of 1 SPT boring, and for vertical structures 1 SPT. So depth, you can go through it. So the deep foundation drill shaft, so you can study the depth and number of exploration points. Retaining walls and embankment foundation over highly compressible materials, e.g. peat, organic silt, and soft grained soil. Cut slopes, cable median and cable anchors, buildings and other structures and sites. So you can see that in buildings in general, advanced borings need near the building corners and at center location based on the size of the structure. Borings should have a regular distribution across the building footprints, and extend boring to the depth at least twice the shortest length or width of the shallow foundation. If deep foundations are required, boring are to be extended to bearing strata. Depth will vary depending on the design or site or other structures. Boring advanced for landslides, groundwater, and specialty site characterization with instrumentation often requires closer minimum spacing than established in the table. So If you are requiring some specialized characteristics and specialized structure is going to be constructed, or area is some specialized or specific, then that boring number of borings will be greater, and the spacing will be quite closer. Okay, types of investigation available to foundation units, method and in situ test, and soil sample type and uses. Standard foundation boring, so SPT test is considered 2-inch split spoon and 3-inch thin wall. So this is the size of the sampler, and stratigraphy is considered in SPT, and soil strength and stiffness parameters are measured. Cone penetration test, tip stresses and sleeve stresses and pore pressure are investigated, and 1-inch cone penetration test sampling tube. It also in this test is also used to identify stratigraphy, soil strength. Cone penetration tests seismic shear wave velocity and none, and soil stiffness is investigated. CPT resistivity and stratigraphy, and flat plate diameter. Limit pressure is used, and soil stiffness, pressure meter, soil stiffness, and CPT, video cone stratigraphy, and geophysics, and physical electrical resistivity, imaging, and seismic methods. They are stratigraphy. So mostly SPT is used. Minimum required rock core length. So depth below proposed footing elevation to top of the bedrock. So how much will be the should be the rock length? If your structure depth is 0 to 10 feet, then for bridges, then that is 30 feet core you should extract out, and for retaining walls or covers 10 feet core should be extracted out, and 10 to 20 feet is the depth of the footing, then your sample should be 20 feet, and if that is greater than 20 feet, then 10 feet core. Placement of the core in the core box, you can see that there is a starting and there is an ending. So start of core run, and you can have man-made breaks and start a new core. Soil type and recommended soil sampling type. So soil types are there and mentioned, and types of sampling. If the soil is granular, then split tube is recommended, and plastic soil, cohesive soil, N value is less than 30, then alternative split tube or thin walls need to be used, and plastic soil, and then split tube is need to be used, and organic soil, thin walls. So soil sampling frequency. If your depth is 0 to 50 feet, 2 samples per 5 feet interval, and 100 to 50 to that 100, then 1 sample per 5 feet interval, and greater than 1 sample per 10 feet interval. Alright, the minimum boring depth for various structures, feature bridges, retaining wall, noise wall, large box culverts, swamps, organic soil deposit, high embankments, height greater than 15 feet or other geological. So you can see that minimum boring depth 25 feet below the ground foot, and variable. So you can also select this one, and the recommended one. Okay, this one is field investigation performer. You can see that so this was taken from Minnesota Department of Transportation Geotechnical Engineering Section Foundation Unit, and subsurface exploration field log, and laboratory data sheet number, and bridge number, boring number, elevation, location information, GPS northing, easting coordinates. So supervisor, drilling helpers, and drilling rigs. So date of drilling started, drilling completed, type of structure, water measurement record, water depth, date, time, drilling method used, hole depth, hole open to a remark, and geotechnical investigation instruments, stop indicator, monitoring well to PVC, piezometer, bore type, and hole backfill, material, bentonite grout, cement grout, which type of fill was used, and you can see that abbreviations for soil material type, colors, which will be helpful in feeding the data, and moisture condition, plasticity, and organic content, descriptions, miscellaneous, water measurement, operation, whole label, and this is your unified class soil classification. So this is a soil exploration field log sheet, data sheet. Alright, field log data sheet, second detailed one, and depth. You can see 0 to depth, and date, how much remarks, mud, course, core, and sampling number, lab and field, and depth. So bridge number, so boring number, and written by, classification, field classification, laboratory data sheet. This is field log data sheet, and this is laboratory data sheet. Soil class by, and date, and moisture content, container number, wet weight, dry weight, density, cohesion, depth, core rock classes. So you can see that, and date and depth classification. So such type of data sheets are used in field. Okay, you can see that field investigation also include visual identification. Visually you can classify them, and based on approximate sieve size limits, classification, boulder if that is greater than soil of the soil is greater than 254 millimeter, then that is boulder, and cobble and coarse gravel, medium gravel, fine gravel, coarse sand, fine sand, silt or clay. So these are the sizes, and sieve number. If they are passing from this sieve and they are retaining on this sieve, then they are cobble, and if they are they are retaining on this sieve, then they are coarse gravel. So these are the classifications. And this is a classification system, and clay and sand, silt. So if your size is a percentage, they are classified based on percentage. If that is having 30% clay, and you can see that sand, and there are the mixes, that sandy clay, silty sand, and those things. Classification of organic soil, if based on the content of the organic soil, non-organic less than, organic content is less than 2, slightly organic, organic, and highly organic, and peat. Subsurface soil investigation. Subsoil conditions are examined using test borings provided by a soil engineer or geotechnical engineer, and number of borings and location of borings depend on the building type and site condition. So typically for uniform soil conditions, borings are spaced 100 to 150 feet apart. So if soil is uniform and soil strata is uniform, then 100 to 150 feet apart boring should be taken. And for more detailed work where soil footings are closely spaced and soil conditions are not even, borings are spaced at 50 feet apart. So if the soil conditions are not uniform and they are not evenly spaced, then you can reduce the spacing. Larger open warehouse type spacing, fewer columns are present, long span required, less boring samples, and boring must extend to form strata go through unsuitable soil foundation and extend to at least 20 feet more into the bearing soil. So this is the recommendations that why they are required and what are the spacing requirements and how much deep you should be boring. Location of the boring samples are indicated on the engineer's plan. So there are site plans on which boring location of the borings are indicated, and these are not taken directly under proposed columns. So boring samples need not to be taken under proposed columns. At site they are going to be taken, and boring indicates depth, soil classification according to unified soil system, and moisture content, and sometimes groundwater level is shown as well. So physical properties, particle size, moisture content, density, these are the physical properties that are also shown, and depth, soil classification, moisture content, and physical properties are shown on the boring. Subsurface soil investigation reports recommendation should be based on testing of materials obtained from on site boring, and it should include bearing capacity of the soil and foundation design recommendation, paving design recommendation, compaction of the soil, lateral strength, lateral active earth pressure, passive earth pressure, and coefficient of friction, permeability. So these all details need to be specified while writing a subsurface soil investigation recommendation. So what is the bearing capacity, and which type of foundations need to be designed, and paving design, compaction of the soil, and lateral strength parameters and permeability parameters. Surface soil investigation. Surface soil investigations are required for construction for following cases: where high water table is there, and you can visually you can inspect presence of troubled soil, peat, soft clay, loose silt, or fine water bearing sand. Rock close to the surface require blasting for excavation, so dumps or fills or dumping site is there, and evidence of slides or subsidence. So these are some visual inspections that if water table is too high and waterlogged area, and soil characteristics, and rock is exposed, then that is having some rocks inside, and dumps and fills and weak soil and sliding, and those. Nearby buildings, surface soil investigations, above ground indicators of soil conditions. If nearby building require shoring or earth and existing foundations, so nearby buildings are there, so that they will require shoring and or earth, just some horizontal foundation, and rock outcropping, bracing of the existing foundation, and rock outcropping indicate bedrock, that there is a beneath the surface there is a bedrock, and good for bearing and frost resistance, bad for excavation. So excavation will be quite hard, good for bearing and frost resistance. Water or lake indicate high water table, where there will be water or lake, there will be high water table, and some waterproofing of the foundation is required. Level terrain, your terrain is at level and easy site work, fair bearing but poor drainage, so drainage needs sloping, and you have to artificially provide the slope. Gentle slope, easy site work, and excellent drainage. And convex terrain, ridge, dry solid place to build, and if that is convex terrain, then dry solid place to build, and if that is concave and terrain valley, then that is a wet soft place to build, and steep terrain, slope is too steep, and costly excavation, potential erosion, and sliding soil are susceptible. And foliage, there are some bushes, trees, some trees indicate moist soil, and large trees indicate solid ground. So these are very fundamental to human senses, that how surface soil investigations can be categorized based on your basic senses. All right, soil classification. Engineers dealing with soil mechanics devised a simple classification system that will tell the engineer the properties of a given soil. The Unified Soil Classification System (USCS) is based on identifying soils according to their textural and plasticity qualities and on their grouping with respect to behavior. So they are grouped on according to uniform. There are different classification systems of the soil existing in the world, all around the world. So uniform soil classification is one of the most popular one, and in which the soils are identified on the basis of texture and plasticity qualities, and they are classified on those features. Soils are usually found in nature as mixtures with varying proportions of particles of different sizes. Each of these components contribute to the soil mixture. So there are different, they are not some uniform type of that this is silt and this is clay, and not specific type of characterization. They are mixtures. So soil are classified on the basis of percentage of gravel, sand, fines, and shape of the grains. So these are the major classification parameters: percentage of the mixtures and shape of the grains. In Unified Soil Classification System (USCS), the soil is given a descriptive name and letter symbol indicating its principal characteristics. So descriptive names are given according to this USCS system, and letter symbols indicating principal characteristics. Placement of the solids into its respective grouping is accomplished by visual examination and laboratory tests. So how you are going to specify the group according to the soil based on visual examination and laboratory test. In the Unified Soil Classification, the terms cobbles and gravel, sand, fine, silt or clay are used to designate the size ranges of soil particles. So soil particles are classified on the basis of classified in groups of cobbles, gravel, sand, fines, on the size range of soil particles. So soil particles size ranges from largest to smallest. Cobbles are largest and gravels are then gravel subdivided: coarse gravel, fine gravel, sand, coarse and medium. So gravel size is 2. Fines includes silt and clay. Silt and clay are fines. So gravel size is 2 mm to 75 mm. Sand size is 0.005 to 2 mm and 0.002 to 0.005 mm silt and clay. And soil shear strength is made up of cohesion, water content, how sticky it is, and internal friction based on the size of the grain. So soil shear strength parameter, you have studied the famous equation that is dependent on cohesion and internal friction. This is determined by triaxial compression testing. So soil shear strength is determined by triaxial compression testing machine. Okay, this is some different classifications, USDA and International Unified AASHTO, Unified Soil Classification and AASHTO. So you can see that these are the ranges. Modified Wentworth. So you can see that silt or clay, and sand 300 millimeter. And this is the range of gravel, and moreover these stones, boulders, stones, cobbles, gravel, sand, silt. Anyone you can follow wherever you are, in whichever area of the world you are working. So you have to follow those locally adopted classification system, and you have to mention the specific classification system in your reports. Okay, soil groups. Soil are then grouped into 3 categories and 3 groups: coarse grained and fine grained and highly organic. Coarse grain divided into gravelly soils and sands and sandy soils. So gravels and sandy soils are classified into coarse grain, and fine grain are having silt and clay and having plasticity properties, and high organic are not subdivided. So these are the soils which are composed of gravels or sands which contain a variety of particles. And this is regarding coarse grain soils. Coarse grain soils are mostly suitable for foundations. They are consistent of gravels and sands, and most suitable for foundations when well drained and well confined. So if your foundation is well confined, then that is recommended, and if your foundation is well drained, then that is very suitable for those things. Drainage is required, then this coarse grained soil is recommended. These are the soils which good bearing value, their bearing capacity is quite good, and particularly the G series, GW, GP, GM, GC, and identified on the basis of percentage amount of gravel or sand. Okay, fine grained are soils, silt and clay, and contain smaller particles of silt and clay. They are suitable for foundation but require compactions. So they are quite expensive soil, so they require quite compaction, and mostly suitable series is CL, and these soils are identified based on their cohesive properties and permeability. So they are classified on the based on cohesion and permeability. Highly organic soils are soils that are very compressible and not suitable for construction purposes, but they are good for agriculture purposes. They contain particles like leaves, grasses, and branches. Peat, humus, and swamp soil with high organic textures are typical of this group, and these are identified readily on the basis of color, texture, and odor. And moisture content is also very high of these soil. So coarse grained soil are having less moisture and no cohesion at all, and well drained and well confined, used for well drainage is required and well confinement is there. And fine grained are cohesive soils, and they require compaction, and they are based on cohesion properties and permeability. And highly organic soils are very compressible. They are cohesive, and moreover their bearing capacity is quite low. Moisture content is quite high. Soil names shown on the Unified Soil Classification System are associated with certain grain size and textural properties. This is the case for coarse grained soils, and for silt and clay the names are based on plasticity basis of the soil. So coarse grained, fine grained gravel, coarse grained gravel, so they are classified on texture property, and fine soils are classified based on plasticity. Relevant information of samples taken by boring which can aid the geotechnical engineer in determination of foundation are: for coarse grained soil, the size of the particle, mineralogical composition, shape of the grain, and character of the binder; and for fine grained, strength, moisture, and plasticity. These are the fundamental information regarding the samples which are required by the geotechnical engineer. Alright, soil groups. In the preliminary stages, a visual inspection can determine the behavior of the soil when used as component in the construction of the proposed building. Soil can be classified according to classification categories of the Unified Class System. Later on, laboratory testing can be performed. Strength and consolidation, which make up the compaction characteristics of the soil, determines its usability for building foundation. So strength and foundation are the characteristics on the basis of which suitability of building foundation are considered. So these points need to be highlighted, that they are important. Strength and consolidation parameters. Soil problems. Now we will be discussing in second part of our lecture regarding that soil problems, and in third part we will be discussing compaction of the soil. The problems of uplift pressure in soil can be reduced by having well drained and free drainage gravels. And uplift pressure can occur in fine grained soils. So this uplift pressure occurs mostly in fine grained soil consisting of silt and clay. Such soil can cause heaving of foundation and formation of boils. So heaving of formation, and those can be formed. So you can see in this image that if I zoom it over here, the foundation bowed foundation walls, horizontal cracks are developed, and hammed basement floor and upward footing movement due to expensive soil, and sidewalk sloped up towards the house. All right. Due to potential, so why uplift pressure? Pressures in the soil generates due to potential frost action. Regardless of the frost susceptibility of the various soil groups, two conditions must be present simultaneously before frost action will be considered. A source of water is required for frost execution during the freezing period, and a sufficient period of the freezing temperature to penetrate the ground. And source of water is required, and period duration is also required for freezing temperature to penetrate the ground. In general, silt and clay, and these are the classifications, are more susceptible to freezing as they contain moisture. Well-grained granular soils are less susceptible to freezing and create foundational problems. So they are less susceptible to create. So mostly expensive soils are creating this uplift pressure, and due to frost action they can generate. And this frost action is dependent on source of water and duration. Due to drainage characteristics, this can also occur. The drainage characteristics of the soil are direct reflection of their permeability. If there is greater the drainage, greater the permeability, the presence of moisture in base, subbase, and subgrade material may cause the development of poor water pressure and loss of strength. So if there is poor water pressure, greater the poor water pressure, the lesser the strength. So the lesser the pore water pressure, the greater the strength. The gravelly and sandy soils with little or no fines have excellent drainage characteristics. Gravels and sandy soils, as they are non-cohesive and their particles are coarser, so they have excellent drainage characteristics. And fine-grained soils and highly organic soils have poor drainage characteristics. So almost fine soils have poor drainage characteristics because their particles are too small. And okay, so second problems which we will be dealing with, that sumps and ditches for dewatering of excavation. The application of sumps and ditches. This is a sump and this is a ditch. Within an excavation is one of the elementary method of dewatering employed in construction. The water entering the installed units can be poured out, and the general procedure of dewatering with sumps and ditches is depicted in the figure. This is your initial water table, and you want to construct something, your structure here, and you are going to lower the water table. So how you have to create a slope, and you have to excavate the slope, and an artificial ditch you have to formulate, and their water will be collected, and some pump will extract that water out, and the water table will reduce. Sump is located below the ground level of the excavation as shown in figure. So this is below the ground level was this one. At one or more corner of the sides. The procedure involves cutting of a small ditch around the bottom of the excavation that is falling towards the sump. So you can see that the bottom of the foundation and slope. The sump is sump is the name given to the shallow pits that are dug along the periphery of the excavation or drainage area, which is named as ditches. Okay, drainage area is known as ditches, and there is in sump water is collected, shallow pit, and under the action of gravity, water from the slopes will flow to the sumps, and the sumps collect the water and is later pumped out. So with the help of this sump pump, you are going to extract the water. Significant amount of seepage can result in raveling and slowing of or softening of the slope of the lower part. So this side can get softened. The procedure involves cutting of a small ditch around the bottom of the excavation that is fallen towards the sump. The sump is okay. No, we have studied this. Okay, and this one, the sump bottom may also be subjected to piping. So piping can also occur at the bottom of the sump. The above problem can be solved by the use of inverted filters that is of many layers. So inverted filters need to be incorporated if you are going to prevent this piping action. These have coarser materials in successive. So inverted filters have coarser materials in successive layers from bottom of the sump pit to the upward. So coarser material is at the bottom, and quite less coarser material is at the upward. So this is the simple method used for dewatering shallow excavation and that have coarse grained soil and or the soil that have permeability that is greater than 10 raised to power minus 3 centimeter per second. So if you are having shallow foundation and you want to dewater shallow foundation, and that foundation that site have coarse grained soil, then you are going to use sump and ditches method. Suitability of sump and ditches. If the construction demands for lowering the water table or the groundwater head of the area to a depth greater than 1 feet, the method of sump and ditches is not suitable. So lowering water table greater than 1 feet is not possible with the sump and ditches. If sump and ditches are employed for greater depth lowering, seepage will be prominent that will result in the instability of excavation slope. So your excavation slope for the creation of sump and ditches will be quite inappropriate. This wrong decision will also bring effect that are detrimental to the integrity of the foundations soil of the area. So that will be detrimental to the integrity of the foundation soil. In order to overcome the problems that arise due to minor raveling and to support the collection of seepage water, it is recommended to employ filter blankets or drains in the sump and ditch system installed. So minor raveling and those you can prevent by providing filter blankets over the surface or drainage in the sump and ditch system. Okay, uses of sump and ditches in coffer dams. In areas that are confined, coffer dams. The common method of excavation that is followed is the driving of the sheet piles that is either wood or steel below the subgrade elevation. Then the bracing is installed and proceeds with the excavation of earth. Later the water that seeps into the coffer dam is pumped out. The use of sumps and ditches in the dewatering of the sheet excavation face the limitation similar to that of the open excavation. The formation of hydraulic heave at the bottom of the excavation, which is found to be very dangerous, can be reduced by driving of sheet into the impermeable strata that is underlying. So if you are going to extract, then there can be a hydraulic heaving, and to prevent hydraulic heaving you have to ensure that your coffer dams are permeated deeper into impermeable strata. This can help in reduction of seepage into the bottom of the excavation. So if there is an impermeable strata, so that will reduce the seepage into the bottom of excavation. Those excavations carried out below the water table can be extremely effectively conducted with the help of sheeting and sumps. This is merely dependent on the site conditions and the hydrostatic pressure and the toe support are the two factors Hydrostatic pressure and toe support are the two factors that is to be considered important while designing the sheeting and the bracing. So if your hydrostatic pressure is too much, then bracing needs to be very strong, and toe support is should be quite strong. The construction process and pumping out activities can be conducted smoothly by covering the bottom of the excavation by means of inverted or gravel filter blanket. So pumping activity can be very easily conducted by providing some gravel or filter blanket. Otherwise, your that extractor or water extractor will be clogged with, due to mud. Okay, advantages of sump and ditches. This method is widely used, commonly used, and appropriate for small depth lowering. Greater depths are not lowered by sump and ditches. That is another thing, that in series you create sump and ditches. This method is found to be most economical one among dewatering systems while considering the installation and maintenance procedures. This method is applied for most of the soil and rock conditions, and the site is mostly recommended where boulders or massive obstructions are met within the ground. The greatest depth up to which water table can be lowered is almost 8 meters, to which you can stretch yourself, and with the help of some and ditches you can lower the water table. What are the disadvantages of open sump and ditches? In areas where there is high heads or steep slopes, then the method is not recommended. So, and high head or steep slope cause more create sump and ditch, and this method will bring collapse to the slope and cause more different problems. And the use of sump and ditches in open and timbered excavation will bring risk of stability of the base. So stability problems will occur. So at slopes there is a problem mostly. Okay, the third topic which we will be covering is in this lecture is compaction of the soil. The sheep's foot and rubber tied rollers are common pieces of equipment used to compact soil. We have seen them, sheep foot and rubber foot tied rollers, in our lecture heavy construction machinery. So construction equipment. So some advantages is claimed for sheep foot roller is that it leaves a rough surface that affords better bond between layers. So granular soil consists of well-grained material furnish better compaction result than the poorly graded soil. So granular soil consisting of well-graded material. So the granular soil and having well-graded material, then that will have better compaction, and poorly graded soils. So grading is very important, and you can go towards soil improvement techniques, and that is another complete chapter in soil mechanics or geotechnical engineering. Fine-grained soils can also be compacted. For most construction projects of any magnitude, it is highly desirable to investigate the compaction characteristics of the soil by means of field test section. And suitability of soil for foundations depends primarily on strength, cohesion, consolidation characteristics of the soil. So the type of structure, load, and its use will largely govern the adaptability of the soil as a satisfactory foundation material. So the type of structure on which that soil is going to bear and load, and how much load, and that those are the governing features. The soil might be entirely satisfactory for one type of construction, but might require special treatment for other buildings. So this is possible that a soil may be acceptable for dams, but they are not acceptable or appropriate for constructing tall buildings. In general, gravel and gravelly soil have good bearing capacity and undergo little consolidation under load. So they are gravels, and gravel soil have good bearing capacity. Well graded sand usually have good bearing capacity. Poorly graded sands and silty sands have variable bearing capacity based on their density. So if there is poor grading and silty sand, then that will be having poor capacity. Some soils containing silts and clay are subjected to liquefaction. Liquefaction is a phenomena in which all the strength is lost, and maybe the poor bearing capacity and large settlement when subjected to loads. So they have poor bearing capacities, fines, silts and clays, and large settlement and differential settlement, and mostly they are responsible for differential settlements too. Of the fine grade soil, group Cl is probably the better for foundation. If you are using organic soils, and highly organic soils are very poor bearing capacity and usually exhibit large settlement under load. So this is a summary that gravels and gravelly soil are better for construction, and they have very good bearing capacity. Or if you are using complex soil, expensive soil, or loose soil or organic soil, then you have to go for soil improvement techniques and compaction techniques. Alright, this is all for today, and we have discussed soil investigation and water problem, and how are you going to solve the water problem, and compaction. So soil investigation is a quite extensive topic, and problems related to soil are very complex and very challenging, and compaction by itself is very great phenomena, and separate lectures can be delivered on these topics. However, due to time restrictions and limited number of lectures, we have gone through just the fundamentals and overviewed the major issues. And that's it for today, and see you in next lecture. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.